sure this is working. All right, it is. Okay. Well, thank you for coming, and I'm so happy that you are all here. There's really not much going on, so I don't know. Before I begin, I just kind of want to tell you how we do these. So I spend most of the time taking questions or listening to your comments, and we'll have microphones, one here and one here. I usually stay as long as people are here, although today I do have to be in Worcester at 1 for there's the hands-off rally, so if somebody's going to go to that. So we're going to try to see whether we can get this wrapped up by 12:15. But I want to thank a few people here and acknowledge a couple people. One is your incredible state representative, Kate Donahue, is here. Patrick Welsh, who's the Westborough, is on the Westborough Select Board. I saw him there yesterday. And the superintendent, Allison Borgers, is here as well, somewhere. Thank you. Back up there. Okay. And I want to thank the town of Westborough for allowing us to utilize this facility so we can meet. And I want to thank all of you again for coming here this morning. You know, one of the great things about being in Congress for as long as I have been is I've kind of met some really interesting people over the years. And one of the people that I've gotten to meet and get to know a little bit is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I actually visited with him in India last May, and he gave me these Tibetan prayer beads, which he blessed, and to help me deal with my anxiety, my negativity, and my fear. They're not working. Now, I said that to a town hall meeting in Holliston, and a guy in the back said, "I have something for you." He gave me these rosary beads to go with them. So I'm all equipped to try to deal with all the evil things that are coming my way. But it is very difficult. And look, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. It's not just the administration, it is Congress as well. And again, people are wondering what the hell is going on with all these tariffs. Look, to the extent that we should utilize tariffs, they ought to be done surgically and carefully, but not across the board, like Trump has decided to employ them. And what he has done, I think, represents an all-time high in recklessness and stupidity, quite frankly. I mean, the Yale Budget Lab predicts that these tariffs will cost, on average, of about $3,800 per household this year. That's a lot. I thought people wanted to see prices go down. These are going to increase prices. We'll start to see perishable food prices go up this week. Other goods will show price hikes within a matter of weeks and months, depending on when the current inventory runs out. They estimate clothing prices up by 17%, a $3,000 to $5,000 increase for the lowest cost American new cars. Electronics like iPhones could go up 30 or 40%. And this latest trade war, his last trade war in 2018 cost the American taxpayers about $3 billion a month in higher taxes. And it was particularly harsh on American farmers. So, I mean, we've seen the stock market go down. I mean, people's retirement accounts or college funds, are in jeopardy. I mean, this Congress right now needs to assert its appropriate role and intervene. And I also want to say, this Elon Musk, whatever we want to call him, I don't even know, Doge. Again, everybody here believes that we ought to make sure that government runs efficiently and effectively. I don't know how many people here are in favor of fraud, waste, and abuse. I've never really met anybody who is, but that's what we have inspector generals for, and that's what we have audits for, is to go through these different agencies and find out where the waste is, and then we address it accordingly. But what is happening now are just across-the-board cuts that just seem mindless. They're not based on whether or not particular individual is doing a good job or not. They're not based on whether the department is doing something worthwhile or not. It's just cutting for the sake of cutting.
Yes.
I mean, Elon Musk thinks that this is a business. Well, the government is not a for-profit business or corporation. The focus of government is to help people. It's not to make, profits like a big corporation. And as a result, we are seeing dedicated federal workers all across this country having their jobs eliminated without any explanation as to why. And what is particularly concerning to me is that there's a disproportionate number of these federal workers who are being fired who are veterans, who are people who have served our country. Veterans make up 30% of the federal workforce, and they are being disproportionately fired as a result of this administration. And in the agencies that we all come to rely on, I mean, agencies like the Veterans Administration, I mean, there are vacancies across the VA Central Western Massachusetts network, ranging from leadership positions to support staff. They have fired, Trump has fired over 2,400 VA employees. We're told that the number is going to go up to 80,000 across the country. We need more VA staff, not less. We do casework with veterans. We need more people, not less. But these cuts will mean longer wait times, and they could lead to worse health outcomes. There's widespread panic among veterans here in central Massachusetts, that some of the cutbacks and some of the firings, especially in the VA suicide, amongst the VA suicide hotline staff, where nobody answers the phone. We're getting complaints constantly now from our veterans community. They say they care about Social Security. They're shutting down Social Security offices all throughout this country. They're laying off Social Security staff. And you know what's going to happen? Everybody's going to start complaining that they're not getting their questions responded to, or their checks are lost or delayed or whatever. And their response is going to be, yeah, that's why we need to privatize Social Security. So they're setting Social Security up for privatization. So that's just in the administration. And then you come to Congress, who are totally, subservient to this administration. I mean, we are moving a budget forward that is going to cut everything that people in this auditorium care about. It's going to cut Medicaid by close to $1 trillion. And people are saying, well, we're going to do that because we're going to balance the budget. You don't save money when you cut Medicaid. What you do is you dissuade people from getting wellness checks because they can't afford it. You dissuade them from going to a doctor when they need to. And then they wait and they wait and they wait. And what ends up happening is they wait until they can't stand the pain anymore and they end up in an emergency room, which is the most expensive form of health care. And that is what these cuts in Medicaid are going to do. Not to mention, there are a lot of people who rely on Medicaid for long-term care for their elderly parents or grandparents. That is in jeopardy. They're cutting money for land and water conservation and environmental protection. We're cutting money for education. Superintendent, I mean, the alarm bell should be going off. They want to eliminate the Department of Education. Who the hell is going to administer the special education funds? What about Pell Grants? What about student financial aid? What about all those things that we have all come to rely on to make sure that our kids get a first-class education? All those things are in jeopardy right now. And here's the deal, and then we'll go to questions and comments. Trump is utilizing a tactic that, if you look through history, authoritarian leaders have utilized time and time again. And that is, every day you turn on the news, you pick up the newspaper, and it's not just one thing. It's about 50 things. They're flooding the zone. They're flooding the zone. And so, your reaction to that is, oh God, where do I begin? Am I worried about the Medicaid stuff today? Oh, the cuts in SNAP. Oh, the cuts in the VA. Now tariffs. And, where do I begin? And what they're counting on is that you're going to be overwhelmed and you're going to pull the shade and you're going to say, I can't do anything about it. And then they move in. And they move in. Look, I wasn't a political science major in college. I was a history major. I've seen this before. I've read about this before. The difference between us and other countries that lost their democracies is that things are happening here much quicker than they did in Europe in the 1930s, than they did in Turkey, than they did in Hungary. Things are moving very, very, very quickly. And this is a time for people to stand up and to fight back. This is a time for people to not sit on the sidelines, to utilize your voice in whatever forum that you are in, and to start pushing back. Now I know I'll go back to the Dalai Lama now. He said that he's fond of saying, you know, sometimes people feel that their voice is too small to make a difference. And he says, if you ever feel that way, try sleeping in a room with a mosquito. I mean, we can all be mosquitoes here. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've been doing these forever, these community meetings. And, you know, and I usually, I think I'm more kind of laid back and calm. I am really concerned. I am concerned about the direction our country's going in, and I'm also concerned about the fact that things are moving very, very fast. Activism is not just for, you know, the quote activists. We all need to be activists. We all need to be engaged. And, you know, whether it's going to rallies or whether it's calling your relatives in other states to ask them to call their representatives, you know, whether it's even talking about what's happening with your friends or at family functions. We cannot afford to sit back. We cannot afford to sit back. So much is happening and so quickly that we really need to be focused like never ever before. And so what we're going to do now is we have microphones on either side here, and I know this is a little different. I mean, be careful as you walk down. But if people have comments or questions or want to talk about a specific thing, you know, that's what we will do. So whoever wants to go first, just speak into the mic so everybody can hear you. Okay.
Thank you for coming, Congressman. I appreciate it. I think we are feeling overwhelmed and we're not sure how our actions are going to make a difference.
You need to speak a little closer. Yeah.
I think we are feeling overwhelmed and we're not sure how our actions are going to make a difference. I'm wondering if you could give us, you just did, but a couple more concrete examples about what we could do if we have some money to donate, where's the place that's going to make the most impact, and, you know, how does it make a difference for me to go to a rally? I mean, it helps me vent with my frustration, but what kind of concrete effect does it have?
So there's a reason why some members of Congress are not doing in-person town halls, right? Because they don't want to hear what their constituents say. Because they're afraid that constituents are going to be very concerned about what's going on. And so we need to demand that politicians actually show up. And I get it, the new line is we'll do teletown halls. Okay, I'm all for technology, but what a teletown hall means is that I would get on a Zoom call with all of you, and I would speak, but you would all be muted. And then when it came time to questions and answers, a professional firm would go through all the questions that you may have emailed, and then would ask me questions like, why are you such a nice guy? You know, what's your secret for being so popular? Whatever, right? And then it said, okay, time is up. So we need to get people to show up. And that may mean that, showing up in districts that, quite frankly, you don't live in. That means talking to your relatives in other states. We need to keep the pressure on all members of Congress to push back. You can call. You can call whoever you want. You can call John Thune or Speaker Johnson. They won't let you email them and they won't let you text them because if you go onto their site, you'll be blocked if you don't live in the district. But you can call the Capitol switchboard and you can weigh in. I think that's important. I think showing up at rallies is important because one is it encourages others to do the same because they don't feel they're alone, but it also sends a signal to the powers that be, boy, people are showing up. People are showing up, that means people are concerned. And they can only call all of you paid protesters for so long. I mean, And look, and being involved in, in politics in your community, not just about federal offices, but also about state and local races as well. Look, I represent a lot of cities and towns in Massachusetts, from here all the way up to the western part of the state. And one of the things that I worry about is that people aren't showing up at local elections. I mean, I get some people in some towns that were elected to the school board that will make Donald Trump look like Ted Kennedy. And they get in because nobody shows up or nobody runs, right? And sometimes those local races are even more important to what's happening in this community than what's happening at the national level. So there's going to be, there will be lots of opportunities along the way to kind of rally around particular legislative initiatives or to stop things or whatever. But I think people have to do whatever they feel comfortable in doing. I think these rallies today are incredibly important because it's showing the world that not everybody thinks like he does. And it also showing Congress that people are not going to sit back while you got education and healthcare and medical research and, I mean, we go right down the list. So, but we're going to stay in touch with you along the way to kind of give you notice when certain things are coming up.
As an individual who's blind, I've been on the streets in the South and the North, and I understand what victimization feels like. So for 40 years, I've been trained in 2 of specific disciplines of the martial arts. And I'm afraid that Congress has forgotten how to fight. If you put your hand on me without my permission, I will slap your hand away. If you insist on grabbing my arm, I'm going to break your thumb. And if you're stupid enough to jump me, I will break both of your legs so that you can't follow me anywhere. But it's up to you to decide what I'm going to do. I don't decide it. And that's what I think Congress needs to do. Stop with this being nice stuff when you get slapped. Stop being nice when guys put their hands around your throat. I understand that Congress has ways of doing things. Yeah, well, so does Sun Li in The Art of War. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So let me just say a couple of things. One is elections have consequences. Number 2, courage is not a prerequisite for serving in Congress. And number 3, neither is intelligence. And I'm going to say this, I want to be as clear as I possibly can here. I really believe that what is really at the root of so much cowardice in terms of standing up to the current administration is money. And I'm going to tell you, if we ever get a working Congress, and a president who thinks like us again, we ought to use that moment to pass honest to goodness campaign finance reform, and get the money on top. When I first got elected back in 1996, in 1997 I got sworn in, my first speech on the House floor was the need to pass campaign finance reform. Obviously that didn't happen. When I became the chairman of the Rules Committee, which is a powerful position in the House, I thought this would be an example, this would be a good time to lead by example. I said I won't take any corporate PAC money. I thought others would follow. They didn't, because money is kind of everything right now in politics. And when Donald Trump had the Republican Conference Issues Convention at the Trump Doral Resort in Miami, he said to them, I need you with me 110% of the time. And if not, you will have a primary challenge. And I want to introduce you to my best friend, Elon Musk, who's the richest man in the world. He just gave me $300 million for my campaign. So dumping 10 or 20 or $30 million to get rid of you is nothing. So that is what these Republican members are thinking right now. That is what the Speaker of the House is thinking. That is what the Senate Majority Leader is thinking. But here's kind of the good news. Here's the good news, right? The good news is that we saw what happened in Wisconsin the other day, right? I mean, it didn't make a goddamn bit of difference, right? People came out and they spoke. He even handed out $1 million checks to individuals who would go to the rallies. It didn't work. And that's because people showed up in record numbers. And we just have to do that again and again. And I also will tell you that there will be other kind of things along the way, like that Wisconsin election, that will start to sink into some of the heads of some of my Republican colleagues, where they will feel that it's okay to stand up to Trump against some of his policies. And I'm hoping to see more and more of that. But again, we just have to show up.
Hello. Thank you for all your work. I am an immigrant Palestinian American. And I just want to add, besides the reforms that you have talked about, I think our system is also broken. We need to figure out how to prevent a tyrant from starting his craziness at minute one. I want to share with you that 3 weeks ago, when Israel started the bombardment of Gaza, it killed 400 people in one day. 2% of those 400 were my family members, my cousins and their families. Besides those who were killed, also many were injured. In addition to this, kids were traumatized by the body parts falling into their front yard and backyard. I know your stand on opposing the attack on Gaza, which I really appreciate. What I want to share with you is that this has been ongoing for 77 years. Maybe Netanyahu escalated it, maybe Netanyahu made it visible to the whole world, but the apartheid system of the Israeli government and the colonization started 77 years ago when Israel occupied Palestine. It has been. What do you do with the Jews? It has been the Jews. What do you do with the Jews? I'll start with sharing with you my solution. My solution is one state that is democratic state, equal for all of its citizens, including Israelis and Palestinians. But the apartheid, the land confiscation, the demolition of lands, the killing of Palestinians throughout the 77 years, the living of Palestinians under military law, whereas Israelis live under civilian law, the imprisonment of Palestinians, including Palestinian children, by the way. There are 15,000 Palestinians in prison right now, among them hundreds of Palestinian children. And nobody talks about them, several of them under detention, administrative detention, which means not being accused of anything. All of this has been going on for 77 years. Israel is an apartheid, oppressive, racist government. Netanyahu is just reading this to the light right now. So my question to you is, why do we keep saying that Israel is our friend? Why is an oppressive regime our friend? They have laws like Jim Crow laws. They have oppressed the Palestinian people just as we oppressed the indigenous people here. These are not our friends. We should really stop paying them tax money. Hamas is not my friend, and I don't care about Hamas. And I don't care either.
Okay, well, let me reclaim the floor here. First of all, what is happening in the Middle East is horrific. And no matter what your views are, I think we all share that. I visited Israel many times, and a year before the attack on October 7th, I had visited the areas that Hamas attacked. And ironically, those areas of Israel contained the loudest voices for peace and for reconciliation and for human rights. And what Hamas did there's no justification for that under no matter how you want to characterize it. It was horrific. And the taking of hostages was also a crime. And I think, and Israel has a right to defend itself, but I think under Mr. Netanyahu, they have gone beyond that. And what is happening right now in Gaza is also criminal. There's no justification for the killing of innocent civilians and children. And so I have made it clear, because I have always considered myself a friend of Israel. I've always thought that, that Israel has the right to exist, that the people there should live in security. I also have been an advocate for the Palestinians. But because of this current Israeli government, I refuse to support any more U.S. military assistance to the Netanyahu government until there is a new strategy which remains at peace. And let me tell you why for those who are supporters of Israel, why I'm really concerned about what's happening, not just in the short term, but in the long term. Netanyahu's policies may be keeping him in as prime minister in the short term, but he's creating generations of resentment that, quite frankly, will be threatening to Israel and to the Jewish people all over the world. The other thing is that we also have to understand that Palestinians are human beings. And the idea that we have been quiet for all these years on their plight, that we've kind of turned a blind eye to the atrocities going on, that doesn't do anything to create stability in the region. And so ultimately, there seems to be a greater consensus around a genuine two-state solution. You can't have a two-state solution if all the Palestinians are thrown out of Gaza. And one other thing, to Donald Trump's suggestion that we turn Gaza into a Las Vegas casino resort area, and that we send groups of Palestinians to various countries in the Middle East. You know what? That's what China's doing to the Tibetans in China. And you know what that is? That's called ethnic cleansing. And that's a war crime. And so, anyway. I'm on 3 resolutions of disapproval of the latest arms shipment. We need to be getting people to the table to talk and to stop this killing, to get the hostages returned, and to respect the human rights of the Palestinian people.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. My question may seem trite. But I want to ask about the Democratic Party as an organization. I want to know why the Democratic Party keeps doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. From my perspective, I want to know why the Democratic Party is spending millions of dollars on political consultants and they continue to lose elections or win by small margins, elections they should win by a landslide. The majority of Americans are with us in our values, so why are we losing them? Organizations like Roots Action, Public Citizen, Common Cause, and many others have the answers for how to run a campaign. So, why?
Well, that's a good question. If the Democratic Party were in Europe, it would probably be about 15 different parties. Just a fact. When I go to our Democratic caucus meeting, we have very different opinions on a lot of different issues. But here's the one thing that I believe. When I look at the last election, it's not that I'm surprised by the number of votes that Donald Trump got. It wasn't very different from what he got previously. What really kind of surprised me were the number of people who didn't show up, who stayed home. And I think that's kind of what we need to be asking ourselves right now. Why didn't people show up? And I think for a lot of people in this country, their life under George W. Bush was no different than their life under Barack Obama, under Trump, under Biden. Life was still tough. The cost of living was still high. People struggled. And I think a lot of people just said, it doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference. And I think they have a point. And I think part of the reason why there's not a greater distinction on a lot of policies between Democrats and Republicans goes back to the point I made initially. We got to get the money out of politics. If we really believe that everybody deserves, quality health care, then we got to make sure we have a health care system that delivers it for everybody. We believe you ought to be able to afford your prescription drugs, then we ought to make prescription drugs affordable for everybody in this country. You know, if you believe that everybody has a right to good education, we got to invest in our schools. We got to make sure that people have the opportunity to get higher education. But we tend to kind of just, we tend not to, boldness has not been our forte in the last several years. And I think that we need to change that. I really do. This is not about left or right, or liberal or conservative. It really isn't about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about what people want, what they want their government to do. And I don't think we've been very good at delivering on what we say we care about. And so I think that's one of the things that has to change. And we need to go back to the grassroots. Again, consultants, you know, they're know-it-alls. They're always on TV talking about everything. And that's all fine and good. But I think we need Democrats to come back to the grassroots, to go out and to talk to people individually, one-on-one. Listen to what's on people's minds. Engage in a dialogue. You know, if we disagree, we disagree, but at least have the conversation. I think people are feeling disconnected from politics in this country. And by the way, you know, the first town meeting I did was in Phillipston this year. And that's a town that Trump won, and I lost. And, you know, we did it, and I remember driving out there, I was like, why am I doing my first one in a place that Trump won? I mean, I want to be loved, right? And so I drove, it was an ice store. I was like, God, thank you. It's ice storm, and no one's going to show up. People packed the room. And some of the Trump people said to me, you know, that they voted for Trump because he was talking about lowering their costs. And they didn't vote for all this other stuff. You know, they just want their cost, their cost of living lowered. And I understand that, right? I mean, I understand that. And, you know, we all, you know, a lot of people in this room here, I mean, every month you're trying to pay all the bills, you're trying to see, is it all, do I have enough? We'll go on vacation, you know, how am I going to afford all this stuff? That's what people's heads are. And we have to start focusing on improving the quality of life for everybody in this country. And again, I think that will require us kind of disassociating ourselves with kind of the corporate Democrats, you know, that basically write out big checks and pay for consultants, but just kind of take all of you for granted. And so that is what I think we need to do. Whether we do that or not remains to be seen. But these are the conversations that we're having in our Democratic caucus meeting. You know, and again, I think Trump is giving us an opportunity to start explaining to people the importance that government plays in their lives. You know, people on Medicare, people on Social Security, you know, people on Medicaid, you know, student financial loans, Pell Grants. And by the way, we also need to do a better job of informing people about things. I did a town meeting and somebody asked me about NIH. You know, like, why do we need to support NIH? I said, the National Institutes of Health? Yeah, why? I said, medical research. Maybe someday we'll find a cure to cancer. And this woman got up and she said, yeah, but you've been saying that forever. We still haven't found a cure to cancer. I said, we've found a cure to some cancers. You're right? And then I have a daughter who 5 years ago, right before COVID hit, was diagnosed with this rare cancer. And, you know, as fate would have it, I had invited Francis Collins, the head of NIH, to come and speak to the Worcester Research Bureau. And it was the day that she had her surgery. But I went and I introduced Francis Collins, and I was explaining to him, you know, her situation. And he said, well, you know, I'll go up and I'll see her before I go back to Washington. So he did. And he said, look, you know, this looks complicated to me. So when she heals, you know, bring her to NIH and let's see whether we could have some of our people look at her. And they did, and they found out that, you know, she had a very, very rare cancer, but the tumors were in many, many places. And I said, well, what do we do? And the issue on her particular cancer is that it doesn't react very well to traditional chemo, and we don't really know. We don't really know. So this is one of these kind of, you know, particular variants of cancer that there's not a lot of research that's been done on it. And I said, well, then, but what do we do? And he said, well, we have a NIH-funded study based in New York, which you might want to check out. And we did. Anyway, long story short, she's been in this clinical trial for 5 years. It hasn't eliminated her tumors, but her tumors haven't grown. And the thing is, and the reason why I tell people that is because the reason why that NIH funding is so important is because I want that research to continue. I want her to be stable until we get to the point where they find the miracle drug or the cure, and then she's totally cured, right? But that's what NIH is all about. But a lot of people I don't think are making the connections. And if you're not into saving lives and improving the quality of lives for people, and you're only interested in like what it means for our community right here, there's lots and lots of jobs that are created through that NIH research. So it is vital that we make those connections. But I'm with you, ditch the consultants and go back to the grassroots.
Thank you for being with us today. On the subject of putting more pressure on Congress to make things happen, I understand there's something in the House called a motion to recommit, which, as I understand it, wouldn't be binding, but it would force everybody to vote either for or against the tariffs that would be put in place. Well, it wouldn't be binding. People would know what their representatives, how they vote, what they think, and put them on notice for how they feel about it. Is that a correct understanding, and is that something that you would be willing to take to the floor?
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, and we would handle that in the Rules Committee, when we do during the Rules debate. And basically what it would do is it would send that bill back to committee with the changes that you want, which would be like, let's say, we want to be able to vote on an amendment on the tariffs specifically. Yes, and we will do that. We will do that. The trouble with with the motion to recommit now is one of the Republican rules changes is that they try to stifle debate on it. So sometimes it's hard to kind of make the connection, but we will do it. We're going to use every procedural motion available to us to be able to, force a vote on the tariffs, because at the end of the day, it's a tax increase on you. I got to be honest with you. I mean, as the stock market is crashing and people's, 401ks or retirement accounts are starting to dwindle, to see the President of the United States on a golf course, driving around in a golf cart, I'm like, really? I mean, I don't even, like, you don't even care? And his subsequent tweets about simply you're just gonna be tough. Well, you're a multi-millionaire, billionaire. None of this impacts you at all, or your family. None of it impacts Elon Musk. I mean, they're all fine. I mean, the people who are getting screwed are the people who are in this auditorium here today. And the disconnect is shocking to me. And the arrogance is shocking to me. But we will do everything we can to force a debate and a vote on these things.
But
the rule will force everybody to vote on whether they want to debate on this or not.
even though you're not in the majority?
Yeah, that is a right we have, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I want to say something. What I'm worried about is what is happening in the United States of America. This is not the United States of America I grew up. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what party you are. If I see immigrants getting mistreated, my feeling is my grandparents came here as immigrants. Why are they treating these new people that way? If they had treated my grandparents like that, I wouldn't even be here.
You are absolutely right. Again, this kind of goes back to the first question about like what can we do? We need to have these kind of conversations, amongst ourselves as well, in coffee shops and at family functions, when we're with friends. Because one of the things that has happened in this country is that the narrative on immigration has changed because Trump has kind of dominated the discussion. So that people think of immigrants as, rapists and murderers. They don't understand that we are a nation of immigrants. The people who are taking care of our elderly parents or grandparents, you know, coming to our home to make sure that their health needs are being met. That may be a Haitian migrant, you know, or somebody from Guatemala or El Salvador. I mean, our hospitality industry, right? Or our medical research industry, right? I mean, our scientific research industry. I mean, we are so blessed with people who come here and provide us, you know, their expertise and their knowledge. And it's so sad to see what is going on. And by the way, it is also sad to see the U.S. government go onto college campuses with masks on and kidnap and disappear students simply because or to send. Now we're sending people who are not criminals to this horrific prison in El Salvador. Like what's going on here? So we need to remind people, we need to inform people about the value of immigration and remind people that there's very few of us who basically are indigenous to the land that we are now living on, right? So, you know, I mean, but my office is on Shrewsbury Street in Worcester, and I walked into the Boulevard Diner, which I love, to get a sandwich to go. And there were 3 guys at the counter, and I could tell they didn't like me because they were shaking their head when I walked in. But one of them said, well, you know, hey, deport them all. I said, what? He said, deport them all. I said, even the Italians? What are you talking about? I said, we deal with a whole bunch of immigration casework in our office, and there are nationals from Italy, from almost every country you can imagine, you know, who want to come here to regularize their status, to get married, or to work in a particular field. I said, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the rapists and the murderers. I said, well, first of all, you know, if you commit rape or murder, we already have laws, and you will be punished. But I said, I want to let you know something. The majority of rapes and murders in this country are committed by people who look like me and you, white men, right? Now, you can deport all white men if you want, but I mean, but the point of the matter is, you know, we've allowed immigrants to be stereotyped in a way that is not just inaccurate, but quite frankly, betrays our ideals and our best traditions.
Thank you, Congressman. First of all, I want to really thank you for all that you've been doing right from the beginning. You've been one of the outspoken ones, and I really appreciate that. There are 2 things that I'm looking for from the Democratic leadership that I haven't seen yet that I might be starting to see. The first is unified daily briefings. And the way that I like to think about this is how Cuomo, not my favorite guy, became a folk hero during COVID. Not for giving all the answers, but for giving some answers and connecting with the people. There needs to be someone in Democratic leadership or a series. I mean, you all have so many great communicators in our party that speak regularly to the people directly about what's going on and what's being done about it in everywhere, and then what the people can do. So that's the first thing that I want to see. And the second thing is a people's cabinet. Which I hear from Hakeem Jeffries that y'all are getting started, finally. It was 80 days into this. But we need experts who explain the impacts of what's happening so that in a vernacular, so that those of us who aren't experts can understand the impacts. Because I think, like what you said earlier, one of the biggest problems here is that the American people don't know what the government does for us. And that's our fault. That's like, we have not. I mean, I don't know what's happened to civics classes, but we haven't been teaching people, oh, the IRS protects people from identity fraud. Like, there's so many great things that they do. So anyhow, that's what I'm looking for.
So we're not necessarily doing daily briefings, but we're now doing briefings on a weekly basis. And I'm going to make sure that everybody who's on our list will get a way to download, and we're having different people explain different issues, you know, as they arise. So that's there. So and we will get that to you. We're doing shadow hearings, you know, because the Republicans won't schedule hearings on anything that we want to do. I mean, we've done some on cuts in Medicaid. We did one on potential cuts to the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and we're going to do more. But I will make sure you have the links for that. I'm having a meeting with Hakeem this week to talk about a number of things, but I will bring up the shadow cabinet because I do think we have some experts in our party, and even not in our party, but who are sympathetic to us, who we need to get out there to kind of put things in perspective, and so we will do that as well. And I, you know, again, I mean, you know, knowledge is everything here, right? Because so much stuff that's being put out there is just not based on fact. I mean, I give you one example. I mean, when Elon Musk talked about Social Security, you know, talking about, you know, all the undocumented immigrants on Social Security, well, that's a lie. You know, talking about people 300 years old getting Social Security checks or 25-year-olds, that turns out to be a big lie too. The problem is sometimes you can't fact check them instantaneously, right? It takes a few days to get the facts all down, but sometimes by that time, it's already sunk in. So we need a better rapid response kind of infrastructure, and I will get you all this stuff in the next week or two.
Thank you, first of all, for all you do for us on the road and in the House. I have a question today that I kind of think is a little far-fetched, but I also feel like we have a collective failure of imagination of what the next bad thing might be. And so I'm remembering that on Inauguration Day, he signed a bunch of executive orders. And one of them was claiming that there was a national emergency at the border. And part of it was that he was requiring within 90 days, and that date is April 20th coming up, that the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security provide him with a report and any recommendations, including the Insurrection Act. And so knowing that Hegseth and Noam will give him anything that he wants, what will happen if he invokes the Insurrection Act? Is there anything Congress can do then? Is there anything that the courts can do then?
So there's lots of things that Congress can do, but we're not doing them right now, and I'm not sure we will because of the leadership in Congress. And so when we talk about checks and balances, yeah, Congress is one of the checks, right? And so are the courts. And there are a gazillion cases that are right now before the courts, so many that we all can't keep up with them, and for the most part, the judges and the courts have sided with reasonable people on how these things should be interpreted. So there would have to be a litigation strategy. People have asked me, what happens though if the president decides to ignore all the courts? I mean, they don't have a police force, and they don't, you know, they have to rely on the Justice Department, right? So far, they've been, I mean, we could argue whether they've violated some of the court orders, but most legal experts tell me that they're just on the edge. But at some point, he will cross the line. And then what do you do? What do you do if, you know, he basically says, well, Congress won't check me, and I'm going to ignore the courts. And that's something we have to start thinking about. And one of the things that I've been talking to our leadership about, again, one of the lessons that Donald Trump learned in from his first term was that he needs to appoint people that are not loyal to the Constitution, but are loyal to him. You know, I mean, Mike Pence, played a pivotal role in preventing the disastrous January 6th from even being worse. But even Bill Barr, who I can't stand, right? I mean, actually, kind of drew a line in the sand. But none of these people he has now will draw a line in the sand. I mean, they won't. So what do you do? And I think we have to look back on history, world history as well as our own history. And we have to start thinking in terms of a general, national strike if it comes out to that. We all participate, and we just say this, we show up and we don't, we don't deliver, we don't work. We show up to our jobs, but we make it clear this country cannot function, will not function unless, the president obeys and respects the Constitution. That's what he took an oath to uphold, right? And so we have to start thinking about what are the options if the worst case scenario happens. Again, hopefully we don't get there. Hopefully as his popularity starts to go down, some more Republicans will come forward and start to push back. But this guy, he's already talking about a third term. I mean, he's not joking about it. He's talking about it, right? Openly. And he wants to be king. And he will be king unless we, put the brakes on this stuff. Unless we insist that all the checks and balances that are built into our system actually work. We do need to imagine things that we've never ever imagined before, because that's who he is.
Hello. Speaking as a naturalized citizen myself, and further to your point about the people being arrested on the street by ICE and so on, I think it's important to realize, for people to realize that people go through a heck of a process to become visa holders, green card holders, and naturalized citizens. It costs lots of money, there's lots of checks, there's lots of stringent regulations that you have to abide by to achieve this status. And I'm afraid to speak out as a naturalized citizen because I wasn't born here. I'm afraid to go to the rallies and hold up signs because I feel that my right to the freedom of speech and those of the people behind me with green cards and visas and who are here as students are not safe anymore. And we're afraid to speak up.
So I had a forum with a bunch of students from colleges and universities all throughout my district. The focus was supposed to be on the cuts to the Department of Education and on cuts to student aid. But the conversation turned to, the apprehension of students and the disappearance of students from other countries. Again, who are all here legally. They're all here legally. None of them broke any laws. You may not like what they've said, but they didn't break any laws in our country. And yet they were apprehended. But the conversation went even beyond the issue of foreign students to the issue of what about people who are born here in the United States, born and raised here. Like, if I say something that the administration doesn't like, could they freeze my student financial aid? Could they tell my university or college, you get rid of that person, or otherwise we're going to come after all your grants and all the federal money that you get? And it really isn't that far-fetched to go from where we are now to there. That's the goal, is to get everybody in compliance. And I just want to say things. I love our colleges and universities. I love all the presidents of our colleges and universities. I appreciate and love all the people on the boards of these colleges and universities. But you know what's really worrying me right now? Is they seem to be caving. They seem to be caving. They're caving and they're trying to be compliant. They're trying to be quiet because they don't want a target on their back. Guess what? You already have a target on your back. They don't like institutions of higher learning. They don't like a free exchange of ideas on campuses. They're going to start going after our libraries next. I mentioned that they're already going after the books at the Naval Academy because they don't like there's books on diversity there. So these guys, there's no telling what's next. But the idea that any of us can be compliant or quiet or not push back, I get it. If you don't want a lot of attention, but I'm going to tell you, if we don't push back, they are going to win, and you won't recognize this country. And again, go back and look at your history, of countries that were once democratic countries that slid into authoritarianism or fascism. The big difference when you read the history is that things are moving much more quickly here than they have in the past in these other countries.
I wanted to bring up a point that under the tyranny we see now, I feel like a lot of the precedent has actually been set. Like, we like to focus on Donald Trump, Republicans, when they're in office, we notice things, but under Democratic administrations, we've also had things like unlawful detentions of the Keystone Pipeline protesters, things like that. Arms that we send to Israel are tested there, and then we take these methodologies, we import them back to the top city that is being built to train our police how to operate in this country, more like the practices we see of oppression in the Middle East. So I guess it's easy to point the finger at the others, but I would like to also see accountability from Democrats for steps, the ratcheting up towards the police state that has occurred. Biden famously was one of the engineers of one of the biggest criminal justice laws that created some of the greatest injustice in this country, locking up so many nonviolent offenders. So I don't know if there's, how do we deal with this moment, but also how do we take accountability for, being part of the problem too?
So that's a very good question. Look, I don't want. I began in the very beginning making it clear that I don't think Democrats are perfect. And again, there's a lot of different views within the Democratic Party. But I think the issue right now is for the ideals and the values that those here hold near and dear. Which party can help you get to that place? And which party is more likely to help you get to that place? And I think it's the Democratic Party. Yeah, I didn't approve of some of the stuff that Biden did during his administration. And by the way, I don't agree with. I didn't agree with everything Obama did. But at least I thought I had a fighting chance of moving them in a better direction. We're talking about a lot of different issues here right now. We're talking about human rights and civil rights. I really believe that we have a better opportunity with Democrats to advance human rights and civil rights in this country and around the world than we do with Republicans. I look at the crackdown, not just on immigrants, but the crackdown and the dehumanization of U.S. citizens who are members of the LGBTQI+ community. Right? Not every Democrat is good on this issue, right? But, to get to a more just country, I believe you need a Democratic Congress and you need a Democratic president. So yeah, no, and if you don't like the Democrat who's in office, then vote to unelect him or her. Run yourself. I gotta tell you, again, people, we all have power. We have our voices, but you also can run. When I ran, some of you may be old enough to remember when I first ran for office, but nobody particularly thought it was a good idea. And part of it was that we had a two-term Republican incumbent who people thought was unbeatable. So people were like, why would you run? Because you're going to lose. And on election night, in 1996, when the polls closed at 8 o'clock, at 8:01, all 3 Boston TV stations said I lost as expected. I was like, how could I lose in a minute, right? Anyway, but then around 9:30, they started to say, well, all the results aren't in yet. We can't make an official prediction. And then like about 10:30, I won. And then I asked my campaign manager, let me know when I lose every single vote that can be counted from now to the end, and I still win, right? Because I was so nervous, like how could they all be so wrong? Bottom line is, people can make a difference. People can make a difference. And so, I'm not saying you shouldn't be critical of Democratic politicians that, are not living up to the standards you believe that they should. Absolutely, grill us, push us, protest us, that's all fine. But I think right now, we are in a situation where our very democracy is at stake. And I'm really, really worried that you're going to see protests basically being made illegal in this country. Yes. And I know that sounds alarmist, but it's what they're giving you previews already about where they want to go. So, but I take your point, and I think it's a fair one. Yeah.
Thank you for this chance to speak to you today. and I think you do a great job in general, and I really appreciate you having this town meeting. I come here as a moderate. I'm in neither party. I've been an independent for a long time, and I'm very frustrated, very concerned about the polarization of the two parties over time, and the evolution to Donald Trump and where we are today hasn't happened in one election cycle. It's happened over a long period of time as each party has become more and more extreme in its positions, in my opinion. The net effect of this is a weakening of Congress. The Congress has become less and less effective over time, and the check on the presidency that is expected out of the Congress isn't happening. One suggestion that I've read, it was in a New York Times article, is about proportional congressional representation, breaking up this congressional districts in a different way so multiple representatives would come from each congressional delegation. And my understanding is this could be done through legislative action only. I think something like this is needed to break the two-party polarization effect that I don't see happening, getting corrected in any near term without some significant actions by Congress. In the recent experience of both parties when they're in the executive office is too much legislation by executive order and the loss of control and the check that Congress is supposed to provide on that.
Well, that's an interesting proposition. You're right. I mean, Congress has ceded too much of its authority to the executive branch, and we need to change that. I mean, we don't want imperial presidencies, and the goal of Congress, again, is a check and a balance, but also, I mean, we're supposed to initiate spending bills. You know, you want laws, the president wants something created, they come to Congress, and they're supposed to try to win the support, and we pass it, and then the president gets to sign it. You know, I think, you know, redistricting has played a role in polarization, where you have state legislatures and governors, you know, draw, you know, really unbelievably partisan maps. When I first ran for Congress, my district went from Princeton to Dartmouth. We call it the Ivy League district, right? But it included Worcester, you know, Attleboro, Fall River, Westport, and Dartmouth. Worcester had a seaport under my original district, but it was drawn purposely to elect a Republican, and you know, and so, you know, and I tried really hard to make sure that even though I was from Worcester, to make sure that people in Westport and Dartmouth didn't think they were an afterthought. So there's got to be, the courts really need to do a better job of monitoring redistricting in terms of proportional representation. You know, I don't know how likely that would be, and it hasn't been talked about very much. But let me just say this: when I went to college at American University of Washington, and I worked my way through college for 3 years, working for Senator George McGovern, no relation. He did win Massachusetts, so I felt it was a good place to work. But I used to show up to his office every day, and I would look at his. First thing I do is look at his schedule, and you know, I noticed on a couple of occasions drinks with Barry Goldwater. And you know, George McGovern, the impeccably liberal standard bearer from South Dakota, Barry Goldwater, the impeccably conservative Republican from Arizona. And I went to McGovern one day, I said, why are you having drinks with Barry Goldwater? And he smiled, he said, why would you ask? I said, well, isn't he kind of like a warmonger? Isn't he like really right-wing? He laughed, he said, yeah, he's kind of conservative, but look, I like him. He enjoys a good drink. He tells good stories. And every once in a while we find common ground. And he said, when we find common ground, we work together. And when it's a McGovern-Goldwater amendment or a Goldwater-McGovern amendment, we're unbeatable. We're unbeatable. And then he said to me, remember one thing, you don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. And we have to get back to that, and especially in Congress, where politics has become kind of a blood sport. But there are things that we all have in common, and we should be able to get that, the low-hanging fruit, we should be able to get done, and we can fight about the other stuff. And I'm going to tell you one other story. This happened in like second week of January. We had a late night vote, and I didn't get a chance to get anything to eat, so I was walking back to our place in DC, and I stopped at a little pub to get a sandwich to go. I'm sitting at the bar, having a glass of red wine, and a Republican colleague comes in, and who I didn't know very well, and he had the same idea. I said, sit down, I'll buy you a drink. And we sat and we talked. I don't even remember what we talked about. It was just, but nothing political. Anyway, a week later, he grabs me in the hallway. He said, boy, you got me in trouble. I said, well, how did I get you in trouble? He said, well, at a Republican conference, somebody got up and asked, what were you talking to McGovern about at Tunnicliff's? And he was like, I was just getting a sandwich. And he said, and people didn't believe me. And I was like, well, right, really? I said, next time, I won't buy you a drink. You know. But the point of the matter is that that's the mood. That's the mood. And the way you change it, though, I think is challenging, because you have to change it. I mean, voters have to change it. I mean, there's no quick fix to this. And when you elect people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, or no, I mean, I'm just people like that who you know just don't want to talk to you at all, then don't expect, you know, a warm and fuzzy kind of collegiality in Congress. And so I think people have to accept some responsibility into who they elect. And that, by the way, it's not just at the federal level, it's at the state level, it's at the local level as well.
Thank you for your service. I want to just make one correction. Not only was he playing golf when the stock market was crashing, but when veterans were coming back and being transferred after this country was
You're right.
and that's a problem. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I grew up in Chicago. I didn't meet my first Republican until I was in my 20s. But the Republican Party is no longer the party of Lincoln. It's no longer the party of Reagan or Bush. It's a fascist organization. And I want to know what you're going to do in order to fight that like it's 1938. Because that's where we are as a country. And I'm angry and I'm upset about what is happening to the country I love and I serve. So thank you for your service, but get your ass off and grow a set of balls and start playing again.
No, I appreciate that. But I'll tell you, if you watch what I'm trying to do, I go to work every day and I fight like hell. And I'm just telling you, push back. I am angry. I am disappointed. I am frightened for this country. And I show up to work every day because I love this country. I believe I'm a patriot, just like you are here today, because you are all patriots. You're concerned about this country, and you want to get it back on the right track. So tune in to C-SPAN. Follow me on Instagram or on X or on Blue Sky or whatever you want to follow me on. But you'll see. I mean, I'm fighting every single day. And part of it is we got to make others feel comfortable to get into the fight. You know, that what is at stake is so important that we all have to step it up. You know, and so I asked everybody here, we all got to step it up. You know, I take the orders that you just gave me to step it up even more. I mean, I'll be dragged off the House floor by security probably if I step up even more.
That's what we need.
Yeah, right. I hear you.
Thank you for being here today, and thank you for all your service. I think you kind of answered my question about 6 questions ago, but I'll answer it anyway. Clearly, the Trump administration thinks that all the rules that really made this country great for the last 250 years don't apply to them. Talk about blowing through ignoring the 14th Amendment, the 22nd Amendment, ignoring the role of Congress. And on the news interviews, anytime this comes up, news interviews with the know-it-alls, you call them, you say, well, the question comes up, well, what happened? It's the role of the judiciary to keep the Trump administration in check. And the question comes up, well, what if they decide to ignore the judiciary, which they pretty much said, John Roberts can say anything he wants, let him try to enforce it. And then the question goes back to the interviewer, what happens then? The know-it-all will say, well, then we have a constitutional crisis. And at that point, it's like, thank you, Senator, let's go to commercial. And you're left wondering, constitutional crisis, that word, that phrase keeps getting thrown around. It's a loaded, scary phrase. And I'm wondering, is there anything defined about what happened? What does a constitutional crisis mean? Does it just mean our Constitution is now a relic of a government we don't have anymore? And if we hit this threshold for a constitutional crisis, does it trigger something? And if we have a constitutional crisis on Monday, what does Tuesday look like, and every Tuesday after that?
So I used to think that, that our democracy and our constitutional protections were somehow sacrosanct, that it was like, so nothing could ever destroy the system that we have here. But I'm now coming to realize, I think as we all are, is that that's not the case. I mean, this system has worked because people on both sides have actually kind of respected the rules and respected the laws and respected the Constitution. And I mentioned Barry Goldwater earlier. You remember when Nixon was president, and he was behaving in an unlawful way. Barry Goldwater, again, the conservative Republican, went to the White House to meet with Richard Nixon, a Republican president, and said, Mr. President, you're a crook, and you gotta go. And if you don't go on your own, I'm gonna vote to impeach you. There's no Barry Goldwaters right now. No one's willing to do that. But if we get to that, let's hope we find a Barry Goldwater. I mentioned before this kind of idea of a general strike. Google general strike, look at what happened in Poland when the Solidarity movement kind of rose to prominence and actually, made it clear to the communist government that they could no longer keep a hold on power because the people were not going to allow business to proceed as usual because of the fact that, that was all they had available for them, right? And it helped pave the way for Solidarity to gain power in Poland. And, and there's examples in individual states over time here in the United States when you've had a general strike, when states have behaved or the federal government has behaved in an unlawful way where they've been able to kind of put us back on the right track. I mean, I know it sounds kind of wacky that we're even talking about this stuff, but the questions that you just asked are real. I mean, and most people kind of feel now it's likely. But in order to do anything meaningful and anything that's going to be effective, it requires some organization. It requires some preparation. And I think we need to put them on notice that if you're not going to obey the Constitution, if you're going to throw it in the trash, guess what? We're not going to sit back and do nothing. We're going to push back. We're going to fight back. And we're going to demand, that we protect what we all, love about this country. What makes us so unique. Look, we're not perfect. We're not perfect by any measure. But this system, I think, making sure that it stays intact, I think is our best tool to be able to right whatever is wrong. I think we have to be very, very, I said before, things are moving quickly. Things are moving quickly. People always talk about what happened in Turkey. It took a while for Erdogan to get to the point he's at right now. But things are moving very, very quickly here. So we have to start those conversations now. I'm going to be talking about it in a Democratic leadership meeting next week. So thank you.
Thank you for coming today, Mr. McGovern. Really appreciate all your support for local farming as well as food security and international development. But I'm coming here today to mention that later today I'll be participating in a community readathon of the book Johnny Tremaine. As you may know, Johnny Tremaine was written by Esther Forbes, Westborough resident, and it's the story of a young man caught up in the revolution, supporter of the Revolutionary War. And I mention this as a Westborough booster. We should all be proud of Esther Forbes. But as important, today's Johnny Tremaine would vote Trump. And I'm not saying that we should be supporting a revolution, but the Democratic Party has lost young people. It lost the demographic, 24 to 35 for the first time in presidential election. And Democrats are perceived to be just supporting the status quo. fighting for what is, which isn't working for a lot of Americans. And so what is the strategy of Democrats to reach out to young people and to communicate with them, not here, where I appreciate you here, but we're all old people. How are you communicating with young people, galvanizing them to a vision, a bold vision for how we as Americans can be better?
Yeah, so we have to, that's, I think it's a very good point. A couple of things. One is, I mean, we have to go to where they are. So, I mean, I spent awful lot of time on college campuses, in high schools, in middle schools, even in grade schools. You know, trying to influence the next generation. Two, I think we also have to understand that one of the things the Republicans have done really well, and that we haven't done so well, is they've created this whole alternative media infrastructure that a lot of young people are following. And we're still, 3 networks and, CNN and MSNBC and regular newspapers. People aren't getting their information from the same places that we are all getting our information. And so we need to be present on those platforms. We need to be more relevant in the lives of young people. And we need to listen to them and figure out, what are their hopes and what are their dreams for the future. I don't know, I'm still trying to figure out what the appeal of Donald Trump is to a young person. Or to an old person for that matter. I'm still trying to figure that out. But whatever it is, he's president, and Kamala Harris is not. And so I think this time of being in political exile should be a time of self-reflection and to figure out, what it is that we can do better, or do people just think it doesn't matter? Again, I appreciate that we need to get more young people. We need more young people to vote for us. I'm just deeply troubled by the fact that so many people who normally voted didn't vote. And so, I think we can figure this out because there are answers to this, and we have to be responsive. I also think that the Democratic Party has lost some of its eloquence and the poetry and kind of what we think. When we think of what the Democratic Party stands for. Absolutely. And I think we have to, I don't know, you mentioned farms and food security. I mean, I'm, as a Democrat, I still believe we should, end hunger in this country and around the world. I think we ought to be, supporting small and medium-sized family farms. I think everybody who wants to get a college education ought to be able to get one. Yeah. I think everybody should have health care. And the problem in this country is that you could be working full-time, and still qualify for SNAP because wages, have stagnated, and you can't earn enough to make a living. But any ideas you have, I'm open to it. But I'm trying to go out to where the young people are and to listen and to get them engaged.
Bring back civics. Teach them. Teach them.
I'm with you on civics, and I'd also bring back home economics, because I'm going to tell you something. Yes. I want to make sure that people in this country not only know what good nutrition is, but knows how to prepare food, because it's cheaper and you can control what you're putting in food.
Thank you for being here. I've been a 5th grade teacher for 20 years in a district where 98% of my students are immigrants. I work with 10 and 11-year-olds. I've got 2 boys that are in their 20s. And I'm sure I can speak for most of us here that we are very scared for the future of our children. And it seems to echo I'm going to echo what some of my other constituents here have said. It seems like the Democratic Party in Congress is burying their head in the sand. So can you tell us what your schedule as Democrats is going to look like this coming week that shows us that you're pushing back?
So they haven't told us what they're going to schedule for next week, but I think it might be a budget bill. Caitlin, what else are they doing? Do you know? What's on the schedule?
We were supposed to be doing last week.
Oh, an anti-immigration bill, and a bill that will remove the cap on the fees that banks can charge you for overdrafts. Yeah, no, look I will tell you this, I mean, I will be handling the rule on the floor. Tune in and, you know, and you'll see one hell of a fight. And, you know, so I mean, again, I mean, within the rules of the House, and again, there are rules, you could be silenced if you violate the rules. You know, we have pushed, I gotta tell you, I think we're getting better. I really do. I mean, I think I'm getting better. And I'm just telling you, no, but, and pointing out the lies and some of the rationale for some of these bills. One of the bills is this SAVE Act, which is a bill that's gonna make it more difficult for women in particular to register to vote. And it requires all this new additional identification. And basically, if you're a woman who happens to change your name, or anybody who changes your name, a birth certificate will no longer, you have to not only, they want to require birth certificates for registering to vote, but a birth certificate won't suffice. You'll have to go buy a passport. And even that may not guarantee your ability to register to vote. So their platform to basically save power is to suppress the vote. And they think that women in particular, I think, tend to vote Democratic or more progressive, and so they want to keep women from being able to vote. And if you put enough hurdles in place, you know, if you put enough poll taxes in place, it will discourage people from voting. And again, that is a danger to our democracy. But you know, we are, you know, they let us know at the last minute what's coming up, and then we react to what they're doing.
Please enlist your peers and push back harder.
I hear you.
I just want to say that every day I am thankful that I live in the state of Massachusetts. I have a couple of concerns, and that is, you know, I know that you're doing everything you can procedurally the way they should be. I'm glad none of my representatives act like Marjorie Tree or Green. But what are you doing to network? I know that we can't do anything if we get some Republicans on with us. And I know that there are Republicans, there has to be some Republicans who don't like this, but they're afraid of being primaried. Well, the way things are moving so fast, I don't think we're gonna have midterms. So I would encourage everybody in Congress to find those people and, you know, get them on board. You know, have drinks with them and that sort of thing. And the other thing is, the messaging of the Democratic Party in general stinks. Every day I get email after email after email, you know, donate to this, send me more money. And I have sent so much money in the past, you know, 6 years to Democrats in, you know, Ohio and California and Texas. And I sent money down to Florida. We got one of those seats, but not both of them. And, you know, I feel like all they're doing is asking for money.
Yeah, so again, part of the reason we need to change the way we run campaigns to get the money out of the system. You're going to continue to get asked for money because, you know, these candidates need money to be able to compete against the money that's being spent by Republicans. And I agree. I'm not enamored with our messaging team, and I think that we need to push back on that. But look, what was the first part? I just
Networking with the Republicans to get some over.
I have a lot of friends that I've met over the years in Congress who are Republicans, and I still talk to them, and I still meet with them, and I still try to engage them. You know, some of them I've traveled with, and they're, you know, I think they're good people, and they'll tell me privately that they think he's nuts, or they think this is crazy, or they think this is awful, or they think this is bad for the country. And then, you know, when we're walking and a reporter puts a microphone in front of their face and says, what do you think about Trump? Oh, he's the greatest president in the history of the country. And I can get that to a certain point. I understand where they're coming from to a certain point. But here's the deal. I'm going to be very honest with you. I love this job. I mean, but if I had to go to work every day and vote against my conscience, I don't think I would like it very much. I think I'd be very, I think it'd be, you know, time I hear, right?
Right.
And we have, and the, it's just like, and so if I'm here if I'm in Washington voting the exact opposite way that I think is right, and that I think might hurt my constituents, then maybe it's worth me losing.
Yes.
Or maybe I go back and I talk to my constituents and say, this is what I'm doing, and this is what they want me to do, and I'm on your side and not on their side. And I think that's, but we don't seem to have many profiles in courage yet. That may change. That may change. I think when people start seeing what the bills are going to be because of these tariffs, that may change more quickly, I hope. But up to this point, it's been really difficult to get those who I know think like we do to do the right thing. But we won't give up on them.
First of all, I would encourage everyone in this room to read a book called How Democracies Die, and also How to Stand Up to a Dictator. They're two very important messages that face head-on the existential crisis that we face right now. Secondly, I want to thank you for all of your service and what you do. Although I wouldn't wish it upon you, I think you would make a great humanist president. Michelle Obama, who I admire a great deal, her message of when they go low, we go high is great. But the Democrats have got to stop bringing a knife to a gunfight. We have got to be more vocal about challenging every single lie, and everything that comes out of this man's mouth is a lie. Openly and publicly, through the media, on television, on radio, and we've got to start now. I don't know how we get the message through to the Democratic National Party, but how we have to start now cultivating and promoting and working towards viable, good candidates to run against him in the next election. Trump has been campaigning for this presidency from the day he left office the first time around. He never shuts up, and he is constantly, from the first moment that he walked out of that office, he has been campaigning for the next election. We need to not wait until it comes around to the year before or whatever. We need to start promoting viable, realistic, strong Democratic candidates. I don't know how we do that, but part of it has to include challenging and fact-checking Trump on every single thing he says. And if we're going to spend money, that's where we should spend money. If you're looking for money to spend it on the media, because that's what people, that's the information that people get, is from TV and radio and online.
No, I think you're right about, we have to be better at fact-checking, and we have to be quicker at fact-checking so that the lies don't set in. The other thing in terms of like a national candidate, I don't think it's likely that we're going to have a national candidate in the next year or two. Multiple people will emerge, and I don't know who our next nominee will be, but that's 4 years from now. In the meantime, I tell people we all have to be leaders. We all have to be leaders. Every one of us, not just those in Congress. We got to push back, with family and friends, with relatives we have in other states. We have to write letters to the editor. You have to start appearing on some of these platforms that, some of you are present on. Maybe, open up a Blue Sky account. Go on X. I don't like X very much because, I look at, every once in a while, they tell you don't read the comments, but every once in a while I peek. And they're brutal. They're brutal. But I guess the satisfaction I get is knowing that the fact that people will want to post such insulting things means I hit a nerve. Again, I think we need to be on platforms so that people start to understand, that there are other points of view out there. But I hear you on. I would like we would like maybe 1 or 2 or 3 candidates to be out there all the time. I want our former presidents out there right now. I want Bill Clinton, whoever, right? Michelle Obama. And I agree with you. I mean, you know, when they go low, we go high. I said it, I joked at one thing. I said, when they go low, we have to go lower. And somebody got mad at me. But I said, look at the rhetoric coming out of the mouth of the President of the United States. How he insults people, how he belittles people, how he calls people names. And that's okay? I mean, I'm not saying that we should call people names. I'm just simply saying that there's a way to fight. And I think as many of the people who have already spoken have indicated, but there's another way to fight too. You know, a little bit rougher if we have to get that way.
Yes.
To mix things up and to get people's attention. And by the way, to cut through all the noise so that you actually get the message out there. The media, I think, they report everything he says, even the garbage. They need to be a little bit more discerning about what they say, and they need to be a little bit more affirmative in correcting the record, and they need to be a little bit more balanced as well, because he's kind of getting a free ride in so many ways, at least in my opinion. And I also think that, again, these media networks are businesses, and they are worried about their profits. And I think, unfortunately, some of that is seeping into what they do and what they don't do, whether they are doing it consciously or not. I mean, but the deal is, we have never seen a threat to our democracy like we are now seeing. And I'm worried that some of the institutions, the media, I mentioned our universities and colleges, they're not stepping up to the plate. And I think we have to be a little bit of wind at their backs. But thank you.
Congressman McGovern, thank you so much for being here, and I just really want to say I appreciate you being one of the genuine Democrats who care about the minority communities and have been a true ally, in particular for the Muslim American community. You earlier talked about, you had a phrase, you said, use your voice. And that's so interesting because I feel like the Muslim American community and those who are speaking out against the genocide in Gaza are trying to use our voice. But you see what happens when we do. There are people here in Massachusetts, within our community, the Muslim American community, that are being kicked out of their jobs, they're being fired for speaking out. We have students, university students, under the Biden administration who were penalized and were kicked out of the universities. We have my own nonprofit. We send feminine hygiene kits to women and girls all over the world in disaster-stricken areas. We've sent some to LA and to Florida for the hurricane and fire relief. But we've also sent kids to Gaza. I was asked not to speak at a conference. I have been blacklisted by organizations, women's organizations here in Massachusetts. We want to use our voice. People aren't letting us talk. There's a group of Muslim American moms in Northborough. We are mobilizing, and we have stories to share. And we look forward to sitting down with you and your team and Representative Kate Donahue and other legislators to talk about the stories that are happening. Just a few weeks ago, at a grocery store, local grocery store, a woman in a hijab was targeted and harassed. Many of you are here saying, what can I do? Be an ally to those that are in this room who are too scared to be in this room. The uncomfortable reality is that the Democratic Party, what is put out in the media and the website, does not reflect what's actually happening. Muslim American women, during Kamala Harris's campaign, they were kicked out, not because they were protesting, just for wearing the hijab. There's a lot of uncomfortable truths that we have to talk about. And so let's have these conversations. There's a lot of students, whether they're Brazilian American, Haitian American in our town, that are too scared to go to school because they don't know if ICE is going to come to. There's a lot of people here, not just within the Muslim American community, that are just terrified. So how do you hear their stories if they're too scared to come forward because they don't know your real intentions? So these are things we need to talk about.
I absolutely. One is, I'd welcome the opportunity to sit down with the group of women that you mentioned, and so we were happy to do that. No, and I think we all have to, even if we disagree with what somebody has to say, we all have to be respectful of various points of view. I mean, and this is supposed to be what this country is about. I don't know how many of you know Alan Solomont, but he's a leader in the Massachusetts Jewish community. He wrote a very powerful op-ed piece for the Boston Globe in the aftermath of the arrest of the disappearance of the Tufts student. And he said that all of us, and he said particularly in the Jewish community, have an obligation to speak out against this because, throughout the history of Jews in this country and in the world, there have been instances where people have been disappeared and picked up and having their rights not respected. We all have to have some skin in the game in this. Doesn't mean we all have to agree on every single issue, but there are some things that we should all agree on. And the idea that any kind of discrimination or any kind of intimidation can be tolerated in our communities here, in Massachusetts or in the United States, that just can't be. And we have to do a better job, providing a circle of protection around people who are targeted. We have to be willing to use our voices to defend people, even people who we may not agree with on everything. But I would love to see, I want everybody in this country, but I certainly want everybody in my district to feel this is a safe place, to feel that they're welcome, to feel that they're respected. And so I will try to do that. And again, some people may not feel comfortable, coming to see me, so I'm happy to come to see them.
Thank you, Congressman, for coming here. I want to bring this a little to Massachusetts. So our state, the three major industries are hospitality, actually is number 3, and then higher education and hospitals and biotech. And these are 3 industries that are going to be hit, have already been hit incredibly hard by this administration's policies. And we're going to see that for jobs, for healthcare, everything. And it's hard not to feel like we're also being targeted, in particular as a blue state. And as I hear you speak, as I hear other lawmakers speak, I hear, you were asked what you're going to do this week, and your response was, what are they scheduling this week? That's reactive. The question is, what are we doing going forward? What is it that we can do in Massachusetts to protect ourselves? If the federal government is taking all of the taxes that we send in from our labor and weaponizing it against us, when do we stop paying our taxes? When does Massachusetts say we will not participate in the destruction of our Constitution? When the laws of this land are being weaponized against us, how do we protect ourselves, our industries, our people, our free speech, our values?
Right. Yeah, no, I don't want us to be reactive. I thought he was asking what was going on in Washington this week. I mean, one of the things, I hope everybody goes to the hands-off demonstration today. I mean, that's something that people can do. We pay more in federal taxes than we get back from the federal government. But it's not that easy to be able to say, okay, we're not going to pay into the federal government anymore, we'll just keep it all to ourselves because we've paid into Social Security, we've paid into Medicare, into Medicaid, which are all funds that, quite frankly, are coming out of Washington right now because we've paid into them over the years. So, yeah, we need to figure out a response here in the state, given the fact that we are paying more than our fair share. But we want to make sure that whatever we're doing is not resulting in kind of a backlash against people, quite frankly, who are very, very vulnerable.
I'm suggesting the backlash is here, when they cut those payments already, when they weaponize those, when we don't get access to the Social Security and the Medicare
Well,
that
people are
we've
still
already
getting-
paid in.
Right, but people are still getting their Social Security. You know, the fight on SNAP, it should be in Congress to make sure they don't cut the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. You know, but look, I get your point, and we gotta figure out what it is that we can, how we use our leverage better here in Massachusetts. And that's a discussion we ought to have with the governor and the lieutenant governor and, quite frankly, some of our state legislators. There are some things that we can do. We can think a little bit out of the box in how we protest what Washington is doing right now. And so I'm all for that. But you know, right now, you know, the major pushback is in the courts, and there's litigation that is pending on every issue you can imagine. But we need to be thinking about worst case scenarios, and again, where's our leverage as a state? How can we push back better? And what happens if he disobeys and ignores court orders? And if people have ideas, by the way, I don't have a monopoly on good ideas. I'm willing to do whatever makes sense and works. I'm somebody who believes in the power of protest and the power of resistance. I've been arrested 4 times over the years in peaceful protest, I should add. My parole officer was nice enough to let me come to meet with all of you today. But sometimes that's warranted. Look, at my office in the Cannon Building in Washington is 2 doors away from where one of my heroes, John Lewis's office, was. You know, and if he were here right now, he'd be telling us all to be engaged in making good trouble. And we got to figure out what that is. And when we're making trouble, we need to make sure that people know that we're making trouble, why we're making trouble, and it needs to be about trying to move the ball forward. And that takes planning and organization. Again, it's one of the reasons why I want to talk to our leadership about, you know, the what-if scenarios if he decides to ignore court orders. But I hear you, and I'm open to any ideas or suggestions that anybody has.
Hi.
You gotta,
Sorry. Hi, so I am 19 years old. I was a student at this school in 6th grade when Trump was elected the first time around. And I remember being really scared. And it feels like not much has changed. And it's really, really scary. I'm currently a student at UMass Amherst, and we got an email last night that yesterday 5 international students had their visas revoked for things as small as off-campus traffic violations. It's getting real. Sorry. And I think that people my age are really just so scared that we're almost kind of just resigned to the fact that no one our age is ever going to be able to own a house or do any of the things we want to do. And it feels like our chance at the world has kind of been torn away. Not to mention, it's really scary, like you were saying, the parallels to the 1930s. There's so many parallels. It's so much deeper than I think most people even think about. It's horrifying. When they started taking the Jews away, they called it deportation too. And right now, all they're doing is taking people to these black sites that nobody comes out of. Like, Germans that are here on visas for work are getting taken away and held for weeks, and there's no system in place to get them out of these places. Because the point isn't to get them out, the point is to take them away. And it's horrifying, and I feel like the American reputation has been completely stomped on and destroyed, and I don't think another country is gonna trust us for decades, and frankly, I can't say I disagree with them. It's horrifying. How did we get here? I have a whole note. Just because there's just so much. I mean, we saw Cory Booker get up and talk for 25 hours without repeating himself. Like, it's inspiring to see people like that, especially as a black man breaking the record previously held by a white South Carolina representative. That was pretty cool to see, and very proud of him for that. But it's kind of just what everyone else has been saying, like, why aren't we seeing more of that? Like, we need to have the kind of, like you were saying, good trouble. Because, I mean, in Congress, like, everybody sees you. And not everybody's gonna see like us if we're protesting, but you guys, if you guys cause a stir, that's what people see. And people my age, we're resigned to the fact that, oh, it doesn't feel like anyone's doing anything about it. We need to see more people doing things about it, because it doesn't feel like anyone's even trying to fight for our futures, and we can't. Like, it's so scary. And then also this is like one more thing. I had a few others, but you know, it's okay. I don't want to take all day here, but I don't think anybody's brought up the climate change issue. Climate change. People my age don't feel like the world is going to be safe for us physically, like inhabitable, within the next 20 years, because all the people at the top care about is making money today, and they don't care about the people that are gonna have to live with their decisions tomorrow. And the government, like, the administration doesn't think it's a real thing, which is, how can you disagree personally with scientific fact? It's just horrifying what we've become. And there's a thing called the climate doomsday clock. It has less than 4 years left until scientists will deem our state of climate change irreversible. And that is terrifying, because within those 4 years, he'll still be in office. Someone who doesn't think it's real. And we're such a big country, it's such a big, well, I guess former economic force, that we can, like, the fact that we don't care and are even ramping up drilling is going to be so detrimental. And it's just, you know how bad you have to go to make all of Asia unite against you? You have to go really bad, really, really bad. Like, we are uniting people that have so little in common with each other because of our stupidity and our hatred and our nationalism, and it's horrifying to see. It's terrifying. So, like, I guess my questions are kind of the climate change question, really. Like, what are we doing to address this? Because, don't get me wrong, the loss of democracy is horrifying. If we're only fighting that, we aren't fighting all of the other things that are also going wrong. And so, that's like, we're still focusing on that, right? Like, that's one of my questions. And then, are we reasonable to be this afraid? Like, is there any hope, like, for people my age to ever be able to own a house or do anything like that? Because I appreciate it. It just really, really doesn't feel that way.
We've all felt that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen 2 or 3 recessions in my life, and I'm not even 20. So it's scary. It's getting real out here.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming up here. I appreciate your passion, and you have a right to be concerned. Everybody has a right to be concerned. These are not ordinary times. You know, this is not, George W. Bush or George H.W. Bush or even Ronald Reagan. We're in a different place right now.
I'm tired of living through unprecedented times.
Yeah,
this is exhausting.
Me too.
I was a freshman in high school when COVID hit. Right. It was wild.
But I'll be honest with you, what gives me some hope is the fact that you're here and you're passionate about all these issues. I didn't know that about the students at UMass Amherst. UMass Amherst is in my district, and the chancellor should have called me. But I'll take care of that later. Right. But I also, we should think about what could be done on the campus, again, to provide a circle of protection around the students who may be targeted, because this is happening right this second. And so
you visited also, you have a lot of support there.
We will. I will make it a point to come out and visit. So we will do that. The issue of climate change is real. You are absolutely right to be concerned about that. I mean, one of the things that that I think the Biden administration did that was a good thing was the Inflation Reduction Act, which doesn't sound like it's about climate change, but it really is about climate change. The biggest investment ever to combat climate change, which this administration now is trying to undo. But you're absolutely right, time is running out. There'll be a point where it doesn't make any difference anymore. And the doomsday clock is real, and we have to figure out to kind of turn this ship really quickly before it is too late. I would just say one other issue that we all should be concerned about, and I don't know why it's fallen off the radar screen, but that is the issue of nuclear weapons. You know, I got to tell you, this is the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You know, I remember in the 1980s, we had the freeze movement, we were actually making some progress and talking about arms control, and then it just died. And now we have people like Putin saying he might use a nuclear weapon. You know, and Trump saying, well, we might retaliate with a nuclear weapon if somebody, depending on who came after us. If nuclear weapons are ever used, the impact on the climate would be not only devastating, it would be irreversible. We all lose. We all lose. But you're right, we have to figure out ways to get these things back on the radar screen, and I will come out to UMass. I look forward to seeing you there.
Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, and we promised
Right,
to protect them.
Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons. The UK and the United States asked them to do that in exchange for our guarantee of their security. And now Russia is trying to invade Ukraine, and we're saying to Ukraine, cave. You know, which is just, again, it is unconscionable that we're doing that. Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Congressman, for coming here today. I'm going to have 3 points. My first is just that the way that person feels as a 19-year-old is the way I feel about my 10 and 8-year-olds. Making major plans at some point of like, I don't believe that they can live here when they're older, so how do I help them envision a future that might not be in this country? So just to say that, I'm going to go very technical, tactical first. I work in public health. The Department of Public Health lost $115 million last week in infectious disease and the things that hold up our labs. So it's happening now. That was stayed or temporarily. But what I work in maternal and child health, and our project officers were all fired last week. And I read that DOJ is at CMS demanding 1/3 of cuts already. I don't think folks understand that how intertwined our federal funding is in our healthcare system. We lose some of these grants, we lose Medicaid dollars, it fails here. We saw that a bit in COVID. So what I was on a call with other states, including red states, because maternal and child health people are social justice warriors, whether they live here or they live in Alabama. They're all social justice warriors. And they are working with their delegations in what you're talking about of like, how do they use their power to talk about maternal and child health? So I want to encourage you to have those drinks, because if we lose our maternal and child health block grant, that's our maternal and child health system. That's the system that reviews every death of a mom and makes sure that we improve that. It takes care of children and youth with special health care needs and durable medical equipment. We run the EI system. We serve 40,000 kids a year. We serve WIC. We serve 100,000 families a month. These things go away if our state infrastructure goes away. So I encourage you, have those drinks.
I will get drunk.
But then I have two that are more, one is the failure of imagination of how bad they could get. So one of the things I'm very concerned about is our National Guard, and will they follow the law if something happens, because it's going to get warm and people are going to be out, and are they going to be federalized, and what's going to happen there? So what I would love to see is this sort of state federal. Like, I'd love a daily briefing or a weekly briefing with the Attorney General, the Governor, and our federal delegations together, so we can see what that sort of state, because that's what we still have, I have hope in that we have states' rights, and what can we do? And so I'd love to see more of like connecting those stories together. And then my third point is around being proactive and imagining the future. It's not just campaign finance reform. I believe in that. I think billionaires are a failure of democracy. We should not have billionaires. None of these things worked. How do we reimagine reimagine take what was good, make it solid, and to that, and I'm not meaning this offensively, but Congress is old. The Senate is old. How do we think about leadership? How do we get 85-year-olds to retire? I want to see more leadership, and so when I want to talk about that now. I would love folks to organize so we can begin that, we can have our own Project 20, whatever the year is, that reimagines a beautiful community, that makes sure people feel hope, that gets rid of the Electoral College, all of the things that we know, because it feels like it's moving fast, but this has been a slow roll for a decade. Thank you.
No, I think some have said that Congress is the best rest home in America. Yeah, look, I mean, you're part of the challenge, by the way, not just with Congress, but with any legislative body, is getting people to run, getting people to want to do this.
Getting people to retire.
Yeah, well, yeah, getting people to retire is tougher than getting, it's tougher than you think. But the bottom line is, at some point, I mean, people have to say, look, I don't even think it's the age as much as it is the competence. I mean, we get people who are 50 who should not be in Congress, and we get people who are, much older, who you don't want to leave, and then you get some people who are older that should have left 10 years ago. I mean, I think we want to get away from kind of generalized statements that it's just age. It's more than that. It's people's ability to actually represent their constituents and whether they're doing a good job. Your comments on on children and helping making sure that women give birth to healthy babies and all that. You're absolutely right. I mean, absolutely right. Look, here's the thing, and we're trying to get the Congressional Budget Office to. They do the cost estimates of everything we do, and I'm trying to get them to start thinking a little bit out of the box. So they'll tell you that if I put $1 toward children's health, that's $1 more that we have to spend in our budget, and they don't calculate the savings of actually investing in that. And they need to start thinking differently, because when you invest in basic health care, beginning when a woman is pregnant, right? Staying with that child all the way through his or her life. I mean, yeah, it costs money, but think about what you're saving. Think about forget the human suffering, but just think about the dollars and cents it costs, if a woman doesn't have a safe birth. If kids don't get the support that they need early on in their life. I go, you follow all the way down the road. I mean, this is about doing what's right, but it's also because we want people to be healthy in this country, but it's also about saving money. So liberals and conservatives, left and right, should all agree on this stuff. This money should not be cut. Same on medical research, that shouldn't be cut. I don't care what your politics are. You all ought to agree on that. And I would say too, because I do a lot of work on hunger and food insecurity. Everybody in this country ought to have access to good, nutritious food, period. And the idea is a budget bill that cuts the SNAP program by $230 billion. You want to know who should retire? Let me tell you, the head of the Budget Committee in Congress, who I don't know how old he is, maybe 50s or 60s, I don't know. He comes before the Rules Committee to talk about the cut to SNAP, $230 billion. I said, well, you must have met somebody on the program in your district. He said, oh yeah, I've talked to people. I said, well, then you must know how much the average benefit is. And he gave me this blank stare. I said, you don't know the average benefit? You're cutting it by $230 billion, but you don't know what the average benefit is? He said, well, you're going to tell me. I said, yeah, I'm going to tell you. It's a little over $2 per person per meal. That is the SNAP benefit. That is this benefit that they're saying is overly generous, that's too generous, that we need to cut back on. They want to cut it from about a little over $2 per person per meal down to $1.60. Now, where do you buy a cup of coffee for that, right? And they say, well, I want people to work. I want people to work. I'm like, well, the majority of people on the benefit of children. I guess you could repeal the child labor laws, right? Force kids to work, The second biggest group are senior citizens. I could send grandma back to the factory, maybe, okay? But of those who are able-bodied and who work, the majority of them do. The majority of them do. So you're working full-time, and you're still earning so little, you qualify for a benefit that gives you a little bit over $2 per person per meal. So I mean, like, really, that's where you're going? That's where you're focusing your cuts on? And you know what's gonna happen? Is people will have will have more difficult time getting access to nutritious food. People's diets get worse. You'll see an increase in diabetes. You'll see an increase in unhealthy pregnancies. I mean, and on and on and on. This is not about saving money. This is just about being cruel, and it's about being stupid, quite frankly. So, but I mean, if there's a group of you that want to sit and kind of strategize,
Yeah.
I'd love to. I mean,
And I think there's cruelty, but it's cruelty because somebody wants to make money.
Yeah.
So I think that's something a lot of people, like Trump voters, because I have family members who are, when we come to terms with, it's always about someone making money, it's making the rich richer.
Right.
That's been a message that's always worked well, and we're not using that enough. But that worked in Wisconsin.
It
That
did.
worked in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Like that, we gotta talk about it. It's about a bunch of rich people.
I think that's a good point. I think, again, we should learn from the victories, like in Wisconsin. Yeah.
It's real difficult to follow those last two speakers. Two things I'd like to mention. Unlike the last two, too many of our young people and too many of our old people get all their news from 30-second sound bites, be it on one side of the aisle or the other. What we lose is the history and the nuance that history provides. Could the Democratic National Committee create a history course? Put it on YouTube, but explain to many of those in our country the history that's gone before and has created the current situation. Whether it's the situation in Germany in the 30s, whether it's the situation in the Middle East in 1947 and currently, but that I think would be a great help. The second issue I'd like to mention is our Supreme Court, which has in many ways caused a lot of the money problems that you've alluded to. Citizens United is a ruling which allowed corporations to begin putting money into political campaigns, and that's been clearly problematic. Two of the older members of the Supreme Court are Republicans. What if they resign in the fourth year? And two very young Republicans, two very young conservatives or originalists, or whatever you want to call them, are then appointed to the court. How long is this going to continue the issues that we have right now? In the last year of Obama's term, he made an appointment to the Supreme Court, which for a year and a half was never acted upon. And is there a solution to that?
One is, when Obama had nominated Merrick Garland and Mitch McConnell refused to bring it up, Obama should have played hardball and insisted that they vote on that. And he could have used some of the powers that he has to be able to exert some pressure on some of these Republicans. Yeah, I don't know what happens if the two conservative justices decide to retire right at this moment. It's one of the reasons why we need to win the Senate back in the next election. But if there's any kind of like glimmer of hope here, what I've noticed about the Supreme Court is whether they're conservative or liberal, they don't ever want to leave. So you know, I'm not sure that they're gonna leave voluntarily. But the courts are a huge challenge, and this Supreme Court has been awful. The Citizens United case, again, that somehow corporations are people. No, I mean, I don't know. Corporations don't have kids. You know, they don't have to, make sure that their families have enough to eat. They don't breathe. They don't have operations. People are people. And when we start bestowing the rights that everyday people have on artificial entities, we have a problem. And Citizens United has opened up the floodgates for all this money to come into our political system. It is corrupting, because it is corruption. The money that is involved in our politics is corruption. That's what corruption looks like. I don't care how you want to, kind of describe it, but again, I don't think our founders ever envisioned a system that was so dependent on money. I just don't believe they could have foreseen this. So yeah, we are focused on the courts. We need to win some seats back in the Senate to be able to frustrate any appointments by Trump. But again, we also, and I like the idea of a history course. But I will tell you one thing though. I just came from an issues retreat, and some of the political analysts that were there said that one of the problems that Democrats have and that Republicans have kind of taken advantage of is that we are very policy oriented. You ask us a question and we give you a policy speech. We think you want to hear the 15-minute version of what we're going to do to end hunger or to deal with the healthcare crisis. These Republicans believe that people don't have that attention span. They don't want that. And instead they appeal to emotion. And maybe there's a point there as well. We ought to provide the history courses for those who want them, but maybe we have to start speaking in terms that will hit people and resonate with people. And I'll just say one other thing. We also have to figure out how to create moments. One of the things about Nancy Pelosi that I tell this to Hakeem Jeffries, is that she was not only about a soundbite, but about creating a moment. Remember when Trump gave that State of the Union address filled with lies, and she stood there and ripped up his speech in front of everybody? That sticks with, that penetrated more than he gave a speech filled with lies, right? Or when he tried to tell her off in the Oval Office, and she came walking out with the sunglasses on, like she was triumphant. And I get it, some of this is theatrics, but you know what? We got to do what works to save our country.
Hi, first of all, thank you for all your hard work. One thing I wanted to address before I really address what I want to address is the woman in healthcare that talked about young people coming up in the system. I mean, you have evidence right here of people on your staff. I think we're blinded. A lot of people don't see that. I have a very political family. Some of them have been in that system. We have a lot of good young people coming up the ranks. Okay, one other thing. A couple of my family members worked for Senator Kennedy. I do believe that he was the last senator to regularly meet for dinner, break bread with Republican members of the Senate. It has to come down to humanity. We have to reach across, meet, not haphazardly, but on purpose with members of Congress. The other thing, we say we can do. What I'd like to see is the first movement by Congress. Why don't we have a demonstration with signs outside the Capitol of our Democratic Congress members? Do what you're asking us to do. Show us, this is what we want you to do. We're doing it. We're not, and I don't want to say just in Congress. I don't mean that, but show us, be visible, show us what we can do. Have a demonstration, please. The other thing is, I do believe that President Trump is bringing us to our knees. There's no doubt about it. That's his plan. We talked about so many issues today, so many aspects of our democracy that have disappeared already. I read an article the other day about what is our government right now? It's not a democracy anymore. It's a hybrid government of an autocrat and remnants of a democracy. We're there. The water's over the dam. I'm going to speak of the elephant in the room, so to speak. We're over the dam. Do you see violence in our future to regain our government?
So one is, I agree with you on that there are a lot of good young people coming into the system. And secondly, believe it or not, we do regular press conferences and protests out in front of the Capitol. That doesn't mean it get reported, doesn't mean that anybody picks it up, but we're trying to.
It's because he's getting rid of NPR, first of all.
Right, so but we need to find ways to cut through, all the fog, so that we are being heard. And one of the things that I've suggested is that, in terms of these like shadow hearings that we're trying to do, maybe do them not in Washington, but maybe do them in Westborough, or do them in Chicago, or do them in, Racine, Wisconsin, or whatever. But just getting it out so that, you have, a different set of eyes that are listening to this. In terms of violence, look, I don't believe in violence at all. And I don't want violence to be part of our future. I was the last person on the House floor on January 6th. I saw what happened. I saw firsthand, the violence that was brought to the United States Capitol. I mean, I took over for Nancy Pelosi in the speaker's chair, so I had to evacuate everybody. And when I walked out, I was from here to where this gentleman is here, from the glass doors in the speaker's lobby, as I saw these protesters smashing the glass and beating up on Capitol Hill police officers. What bothers me to this day, I can't get over this, is that we couldn't even come together as a Congress or even as a country to condemn that violence. 140 cops were beaten for trying to protect all of us. I had Republican members that were in tears, hiding behind chairs, and I've confronted them about this. I said, I was in the speaker's chair, I saw you cowering, you were afraid. I'm now basically saying that it was a peaceful day of protest. So, and he pardoned them all, not just for that day, but it turns out he pardoned them for other crimes they committed, which is again, despicable. The bottom line is that, we can't ever allow ourselves to be them. I'm a student of the Dalai Lama and Gandhi, and I believe that peaceful protests can actually bring this country to a place where it has to respect the will of the people. And I think that's where I would encourage us to focus our attention. I don't know what the other side will do. I will tell you that in my office, the calls we get, I mean, our poor interns, they deserve Purple Hearts for answering the phone. But I mean, we regularly get people calling, with threats of violence.
We already have been violent.
Right, and but we have to condemn that. We have to condemn that.
Thank you. All right. Hi, Jim. We've known each other since Diane Snyder's house when you were campaigning in 1996, and then I happened to be finishing my workout just as Peter Blut's campaign realized you won. It was wonderful. Anyway, I want to talk about really following up on what you had to say and what you were talking about as far as a general strike. Who I am is I'm Nora Watts. I am a full-time working nurse who next week will be 73 years old. I am a peaceful labor activist, and I want to thank every one of you for being here, because we're all the leaders, or not all the leaders, we're some of the leaders that are really going to have to take this thing back. Because Jim's right, it is going to take a national strike. But what that looks like, I think when you say those words, people don't really get the idea. So I'm going to go back to 2017, and if you don't know this name, learn it and read about it. Sarah Nelson. You know Sarah Nelson. Sarah Nelson is the chair, well, not anymore, but she's the chairperson of the flight attendants union during the time of the shutdown of the government under the Trump administration. And it was that union and Sarah, you gotta let me hold this, and Sarah who actually brought Trump to his knees, as far as I'm concerned, and helped in 24 hours to get the government opened by not every airline shutting down, but a flight here, a flight there, unannounced. And that's how they did what could have been amounted to a mini national strike. And I think I also spent last weekend at UMass Amherst, and I'm very proud of that young woman who stood up
at a conference where labor people started to talk about that very same thing. And it's not going to be all of us in one day shutting down every single business. It's probably going to look more like what the flight attendants did. You know, maybe car dealership here, car dealership there, supermarket that has to shut because people don't go to work, a factory that shuts because people don't work, where they never know when it's going to happen and when. But it makes it very clear that we can bring this government to their knees. Now, I wish that you in Congress could solve this for us, but you can't. You're doing everything that you can, but it's Republican controlled, and you're absolutely right. It's all about the money. So it's going to be up to us and our individual actions, and it won't look the same for any of us. But all the people who came here today, those are the beginning of the leaders who can make this thing happen. Them and organizations like Indivisible, maybe it's your church or your synagogue or whatever place of worship that you have. Those women, those brave women who spoke up, who were stopped from speaking, who were Muslim, all of us working together in our little places to bring this government to their knees. And it is going so fast that I believe it's not going to take anything less than that.
Thank you very much for coming here, Representative. It's clearly obvious from the response a few seconds ago that the pardoning of 1,600 was so obviously wrong, it doesn't even need anything to say about it. And for example, Trump's statement about Ukraine starting the war is so obvious, there's nothing needs to be said about that. And there are plenty of things every day that you and Democrats should be putting on your website to say, this is what the president did, this is what we think, okay? So that's okay so far. So we say that the Republicans may agree with that these things are wrong, but they don't have the guts to say it, kind of thing. So I was just kind of curious. I spend a lot of time in Pennsylvania. I actually ran an apartment there, so I feel a little bit connected to my Senator McCormick there, the Republican senator, who I want to let him know, because he's Republican, I don't agree with these things that his Republican president has done. So I go to his website every day. I see that he's putting up things like he helped some guy get into West Point or something like that. It's absolutely useless stuff in relationship to what we're talking about here. So I thought, I've written him tons of letters saying what's really important and what I think about. So one day I thought I would tell him, okay, well, you know, your Democratic counterparts have lots of guts, and they're not afraid to speak up against the president. So I went to your website, I went to Senator Warren's website, I went to Senator Markey's website. Your website had one item that was against President Trump's actions, which I greatly appreciate. The other two websites had nothing at all. So how do I tell Senator McCormick that you guys are standing up against Trump? I can't even say, look what the Democrats are doing. They have the guts, but it's not happening. So it's very important. Everybody's been talking about communication here, and communication is important. So put it out there every day, not just you, not just the Massachusetts senators, every Democratic senator should be setting, every day they should look at something Trump did, and they should point out what's wrong with it, and it should just be littered all over the web so that you can't miss it, and so that the people in the media have something to point to. This is what Senator X said about that. And if we don't do that, how can we ever give the Republicans cover to say, well, the Democrats said this and I kind of agree with it, so maybe I'll put it on my website. We need to give Senator McCormick, who went to West Point, who worked with George W. Bush, has no interest in this garbage. How can we give senators like that the cover that they need to stand up and move forward?
Well,
Thanks very much.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. And look, so there's a difference between kind of websites and Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts and Blue Sky accounts, and I mean, there's probably, I mean, if you go onto X or Facebook, you'll see a lot more of my critiques of this current administration. Kind of the web page oftentimes is the place you go to say, you know, I want to apply to West Point, how do I do it? Or I have a question on Social Security, who do I call? So I would look just beyond the websites, looking at people's posting on social media, because that's where most of the discussion comes, but I hear your point. No, we all have to be in this. Can't just be 1 or 2 or 3 people. Everybody has to be in it. That's how we're gonna lift up the message. I'm gonna do 2 at a time, just so when I'm told I gotta be out of here in less than a half an hour, so I wanna make sure I get everybody.
Congressman, hi, we've met many times before. Thank you for coming today. I actually have 2 questions. I don't have a political statement.
Okay.
So my one question is, where I think he was Homeland Security or someone up there, said that they don't care what the courts rule, they're gonna ignore whatever is said. So my one question is, what are staffers in jail for disobeying the courts the way that any one of us in the room would have happened to us? That's question one. The second question has to do with Social Security. I have a husband that retired last year. I'm seeing his 401k tank, literally tank because of stupid tariffs. Sorry if I've offended anybody with that, it's my own personal opinion on them. But he's tanking the global economy with them. I've been hearing some rumblings in the news that supposedly Republicans and Democrats are fed up as well and are coalescing to do something to, like, you know, vote on something to maybe limit his ability to do these stupid tariffs, because everything's gonna get more expensive for everybody here. And I'd like to retire someday. I'll be honest, I would. I'm not getting any younger. You aren't either, right? But I hope you work a lot longer than I do. So, but the point is, everything's getting more expensive for everybody.
Good, thanks. I'll come back to you.
Hi, no, I have 2 quick things. The first, Congressman, I just want to thank you for the very strong rebuke you and the words you spoke outside USAID after that agency was I worked in global public health my entire career. I worked at CDC, I worked on USAID project, I've worked on, I work with a lot of colleagues right now around the world who work with USAID and who have lost their jobs or seen their programs that were, really vaccinating children cut. And so I shared that clip with them, a lot of my colleagues, and I bring their appreciation to you. There's a lot of things I could talk about, but I wanted to share something a lot more personal to me. I am married to an immigrant. He's in this country as a green card. He's been in this country a long time. Came as a student, graduate student. He's legal the entire time. He's never had a parking ticket. He's a post on social media. But I'm scared. We are understood that there was an executive order that came out, which is essentially the new travel ban. That's supposedly, it was actually supposed to be this week. We're a bit anxious about it. That certain people from certain countries can't come to this country, right? And then there was another provision that said people from certain countries that he was directing his national security team to review the procedures to grant visas, green cards, and presumably citizenship. We have 1 more year until my husband can apply for citizenship from people from certain countries. I imagine that includes my husband as he's from Iran. I was talking to my neighbor, our next door neighbor. We live 5 minutes down the road, just over the border in Shrewsbury. She said she was out walking her dogs and saw a CBP truck just driving around our neighborhood. Customs and Border Protection was doing it. I don't know why they would be in our neighborhood. We have like a little sleepy town. A lot of our neighbors are immigrants as well. My husband's fine. He has a doctorate in engineering. He works twice a week in Cambridge for a high-tech company. He designs ultrasound machines. But I'm very, very scared. I get up at night and I think, what if, Iran is obviously going to be one of those countries that they're going to review. A lot of people don't know. Iran has compulsory military service for all men. My husband had to serve in the military to come to this country. I mean, if you knew what my husband has been through in his life, to come to this country, to build a life, we own a home, we have a 3-year-old son. He was born during a war. He's a Kurd. Kurds are discriminated against in Iran. My mother-in-law is 65. She was out protesting in the streets, took off her hijab, which is a scary thing to do, saw her neighbors shot and killed, protesting against the murder of that young woman who was not wearing her hijab correctly. My brother-in-law was arrested. He's a physician and he was taking care of protesters during that time. And so all of this is to say, I worry and I see what happened, to those men who were shipped off to El Salvador, and the one that the administration had said, oh, this was an administrative error. This guy who actually got asylum in this country because he was fleeing gang violence, who they said he was a gang member. And the judges have been doing the work, ordered him back into this country by Monday, and members of Trump's administration are heckling him on social media, heckling that judge on social media. And so I read that man's wife hasn't talked to him since he left in mid-March. And Trump is talking about bombing Iran. You go through all the things, like, what happened to Japanese Americans in World War II. So all of this is to say, I guess my question is, how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect our family and our community and our friends who are all immigrants when the judges who are trying to do the work are getting attacked?
Well, first of all, thank you. And with regard to your husband, we need to make sure you have all of our contact information, so if anything seems out of the ordinary, you let us know. I think that this is a community that will provide a circle of protection to you and your family. One of the things that I've signed up to be part of is a rapid response kind of team, that when ICE shows up or somebody shows up, that no one knows why they're there, then we all show up there too. I was at the business in Westborough where we got a notification that ICE had shown up. Luckily, the person at the front door asked for a warrant. They didn't have one, so they were turned away. But here's what really gave me hope. So I got there really quickly. So it was like 3 people there when I got there. Over a period of about 20 minutes, about 20, 25 people showed up. So people, a retired couple, a guy in the military on leave, school wasn't in session that week, a teacher. So, I mean, there are good people in our community. So we will have your back, and we will. I mean, but that doesn't. I know it doesn't alleviate your concern or your worry. These are unbelievable times. Thank you for your words about the importance of investing in global health and about supporting USAID. I went down there when they shut the office down. Let me tell you something. I believe that one of the greatest tools we have to engender goodwill and to protect our national security as well is to help feed the world's hungry. I mean, I think that's a better use of our money than sending bombs all over the world. That's just me. But and I also think that the work the USAID does to try to control diseases that are springing up in various parts of the world is a good thing, because if we don't, then these epidemics become pandemics, and we're dealing with them here. So for all those reasons, I'm a supporter of USAID, but even if you don't care about that, about $2 billion of the food that we send overseas is grown by farmers here in the United States. And so how do you make that difference up to our farmers? You don't. So we're not only turning our back on our ideals and on helping desperate and hungry people halfway around the world, we're turning our backs on our farmers halfway down the block. It makes no sense. And on the question of on tariffs, that they tanked our 401ks and our retirement funds. Yeah, I mean this is, there's no thought was given to that. I mean, Trump is saying just tough it out. Yeah, no, this is happening. Yeah, Congress has some tools available, and we're going to try to insist on basically getting votes on his tariff policy to try to see if we can reel in some of the excesses here and be able to prevent even worse damage being done. But that requires the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate to allow it. We will yell and scream. We're going to use procedural motions. as somebody asked earlier, this motion to recommit to try to force a vote. But in order to force a vote, we need a majority of the House to vote for a motion to recommit. So we will do that. And in terms of the, and the same thing with Homeland Security and the excesses, that they've been engaged in. We have litigation that's pending. Again, our hope and our expectation is that anybody in this government who is told by a court to do X, Y, or Z will do that, because that's what our system calls for. If they don't, we're going to have to think of some other creative measures to push back. We need to make it clear, if they're going to toss the Constitution into the garbage can, that we're not going to allow it to happen silently. We're not going to go along to get along. We're going to fight back.
Actually, Carolyn's question was, is there a specific plan in place when Trump stops following the court orders? And I'm supposed to email her the answer.
Yeah, there isn't. I mean, and that's one of the reasons
There needs to be.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why I'm suggesting, a national strike. I think that is I think that is something that, that to me would be effective. We need something that is not just an individual protest, in front of the White House. We need a national. We need a national movement to actually.
But there also needs to be a response from Congress and the judiciary that is the official response. And is that already in train?
So the judiciary branch is making judgments on a number of items, right? So they're doing their job. If the administration doesn't follow that, then Congress really has a role to play in forcing the administration to do that. And one of the tools that Congress has available to them is impeachment, if the president is not in compliance with the Constitution. The issue is whether or not a Congress controlled by Republicans would allow even the majority to work its will. I think that's probably doubtful right now. I mean, that may change depending on public opinion. And then the third thing is that what other tools do we have? What is the power of the people? And people have power. We've never been called to use it in such a manner before, but these times are demanding us to think differently, out of the box, and to take extraordinary action. And my expectation is that we would do that.
Hey there, thank you so much for your time today. My question really revolves around the why voters stay home. There's been many things said today that hit upon that point. I myself have stayed home for some elections before. Earlier we talked about having established candidates earlier, similar to how Trump essentially campaigned throughout the whole Biden presidency. And I absolutely understand. Having a candidate that early is not always the good thing, but also waiting until we're past the midterms also puts us at a disadvantage. You see, what's happening on the Republican side is that they're throwing out the flashy words, eggs, they're eating the cats and dogs, they're throwing out the things that the young voters, that impressionable young voters will latch onto and remember. And what we're doing is it feels for me anyway, is that we're mostly on defense. We're constantly trying to defend the wild, outlandish things that are being said. So I don't know necessarily that at the heart of what we want to do, I don't feel that at the heart of what our party stands for needs to change. But the message needs to change in terms of how we respond to match the times. I think that's why we're losing elections. That's why we're losing voters who don't show up, because our responses often politicize it broke my heart during the elections when President Trump said they're eating the cats and dogs, and our representative smirked. That's not the appropriate response. And I think that's where she lost some candidates who stayed home. And I think, so for me, I think the message is simple why Democratic voters stay home sometimes. We're not appealing by saying the key things that will attract young voters. Not every young voter has had the opportunity to come up with a great education. They have to do their own research. So there's varying levels of people out there, and I worry that we're not connecting with all of them by being more accountable in our language.
I had a question about the executive orders targeting law firms. It's a personal one because I work for a big law firm. I'm non-binary, I use they, them pronouns in my email signature, things like that. I'm very open. My firm was one that was not one that was targeted by the executive order, but is following suit with the general money-grubbing cowards. We haven't given up on our values, at least that's what they're saying, but we've changed our website to say the word inclusion instead of the word diversity. It's just kind of a whole thing of like hiding at the back of the line of the firing squad will not save you. Anyway, I was just curious about like if there anything being done in Congress to challenge the like extreme abuse of power in the way that he is just using executive orders threatening revoking federal security clearances and things like that to target people where like even if they win court orders, their business is destroyed before they get to that point, and so everyone sees that and is just cowering as a result.
Yeah. Well, some of these executive orders, by the way, are meaningless. They're designed to intimidate.
But the intimidation,
right? Right, and so, but what's really what's bothering me right now with some of these law firms is that they're giving in. They're giving in. I mean, law firms that he's targeting, he's naming by name, that were engaged in litigation against him, now have to donate like $100 million in free legal services to his administration, right? And I get it. Some of these law firms are businesses too, right? I mean, they want to keep their clients. They want their national security clearances so they can continue to make money. But by caving, what they're doing is they are putting us on this slippery slope, in which we are basically kind of weakening, the due process in this country. Yeah, it is extraordinary.
I'm very disappointed because I feel if anyone had the power to stand up, it should be these big law firms that have all the legal power.
You have all these smart lawyers that,
the money is more important than
right, no. And I'm saying, and my criticism, by the way, is not just against law firms. I want our colleges and universities to be more, engaged in pushing back. I want our hospitals to do the same thing. As NIH is cutting important research, I mean, being quiet doesn't mean they're going to stop doing it. They're just going to continue to do it, and it'll be easier for them to get away with it. And same with newspapers. I mean, look at the Washington Post. I mean, their editorial page now is a shell of what it used to be. And in terms of the messaging, clearly, we haven't gotten it right. I mean, if we did, we would have won the presidency. I will say again, I think that we have to, the analysis that we heard at the Democratic Issues Retreat, we need to appeal to emotion as well as to people's, desire for policy. We need to be better at that, and better at messaging. Again, I still think that we have to prove to people that it makes a difference if we win, because for a lot of people in this country, they don't think it does. For young people, we need to be speaking their language. We need to be where they are. We need to be on the platforms that they get their news from. And I'll just say one other thing, about the last presidential election. I got to tell you, with all love and respect and friendship and all good things for Joe Biden, he should have not run to begin with. I mean, and the fact that we waited so damn long put her at a disadvantage. I think she would have been a better candidate or appealed to more had she gone through a nominating process. I think if she had more time, she would have won. I will tell you another thing. I'm going to just say this, and I hate to say it, in the year 2025, but being a woman in this country is still a political disadvantage when it comes to running for president. The number of men that I encountered in Massachusetts who told me they could not vote for her because she was a woman, it blew my mind. I didn't expect it. And by the way, and a lot of them were young men. So, I don't know what the hell it's going to take. But, you know, we got to figure that out as well. So, I mean, the last two here.
Just a comment, I don't have a question. The young woman who spoke at the microphone earlier, a 19-year-old, who was concerned and frustrated. I was born in September of 1932, about 2 or 3 weeks before Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, was elected. And it really distresses me that at 92, what I'm trying to do now is stay alive long enough that I could vote Donald Trump out. The damage that he's done and he continues to do is very detrimental to our democracy. But anyway, I understand her feeling, and I'm concerned about my daughters, my grandchildren, and hopefully if I ever have great-grandchildren, them too. And my other comment is, I voted for you the first time you won, not the first time you ran. You may recall I was supporting another Democrat.
He would have been good too.
But I'm very pleased and I'm very proud that you are our Congressman.
Oh, thank you.
Jim McGovern, how you doing? I'm from the same neighborhood as this man, Greendale, Massachusetts, yeah. So, a couple of things I wanted to say. One is, you have already mentioned a couple of them, but January 6th, last man out, am I correct?
Yes.
One of them. Yeah. I mean, you know, I just personally wanted to say thank you for that. You were not down the corridor holding the door for Josh Hawley. I know. So anyway, grew up in the neighborhood. I know his parents very well, know his whole family. Nancy, your sister?
Wendy and Kelly.
Huh?
Wendy and Kelly are my sisters.
Oh, yeah. That was going back to the 50s
while,
and
yeah.
60s to grammar school.
Yeah.
But I always knew the name McGovern in his district. So thank you for everything you're doing. I know you've got to leave. I don't know how he does this. You know, there's people waiting somewhere for him. They're going, where is he? Where is he? And this is where he is, right here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He mentioned that my dad owned a package store. You know, when I a lot of times in Washington, people will tell me that they were longtime supporters of my dad, and they think it's George McGovern, right, the president. And they always seem a little shocked when I say, well, thank you, my dad owns a package store in Worcester, Massachusetts. Thank you for the support, and please keep supporting him. But here's the deal. I mean, we can get through this, but we all have to, it's an all hands on deck approach. I always tell people we can't change the past, but we can help to shape the future. So we can, you know, Donald Trump, you know, that happened. We can't change what happened. We can only influence the future. And I believe that we have a fighting chance to save this country and to save this country's democracy. In all my lifetime and in all your lifetime, our democracy has never been tested quite like this. You know, and I hope in the very near future, when we reconvene, we can say, you know, we stood up, we pushed back, and we won. And it's not for us, it's for our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, and future generations. We love this country, that's why we're here. This gives me great hope today, and I want to thank all of you for being here. Thank you.